A bully tried to mock a vulnerable fan. Kurt Cobain stopped the song and did the unthinkable. December 13, 1993. The Pier 48 warehouse in Seattle. The air inside was thick with cigarette smoke and the electrical hum of amplifiers warming up. Outside, rain hammered the corrugated metal roof like 1,000 desperate fists. 18,000 bodies pressed against each other in the darkness. Among them stood a 17-year-old girl named Sarah Mitchell, clutching a homemade sign that read, "Thank you, Kurt," in shaky handwriting. Her hands trembled not from excitement, but from something far darker. 3 rows behind her, college guys had been pointing at her for 20 minutes, their laughter cutting through the noise like broken glass. On stage, Kurt Cobain adjusted his microphone stand, unaware that in exactly 7 minutes he would make a decision that would define his legacy more than any platinum record ever could. What happened in those next 7 minutes would change everything. Before we continue, I want to say something. This channel exists because we believe the world needs more stories like this one. Stories that remind us what it means to be human when everything tells us to look away. If you're searching for something that actually matters, consider joining our community. Hit that subscribe button, not for us, for yourself. Because these are the stories that restore faith when the world feels cold. Now, let's go back to that warehouse in Seattle. Sarah Mitchell shouldn't have been there at all. 3 months earlier, her mother had died from ovarian cancer. The funeral was on a Tuesday. Sarah didn't cry. She sat stone-faced in the front pew while relatives told her that time heals all wounds, and she's in a better place now. They didn't know her mother was the only person who understood her. They didn't know about the cutting. They didn't know about the suicide note she had written and rewritten 17 times, each version getting shorter, getting closer to something she might actually use. Her therapist suggested music as an outlet. Sarah rolled her eyes, but then, late one night, she heard Nirvana's All Apology. Kurt's voice, raw and broken, and somehow still standing, spoke to something deep in her chest that had been silent since her mother's diagnosis. She listened to that song 47 times in one night. The lyrics didn't give her answers. They gave her something better. Permission to feel broken without being ashamed of it. When she heard Nirvana was playing a hometown show, she spent her entire savings on a ticket, $235, money she had been saving for college. But college seemed like a fantasy for someone who wasn't sure they'd live to see graduation. She needed to be in that room. She needed to breathe the same air as the person whose voice had kept her alive. But standing in that crowd, clutching her sign, Sarah realized she had made a terrible mistake. The guys behind her started with whispers. Then came the laughter. Then came the words, loud enough for her to hear every syllable. "Look at this freak. Is that a dude or a girl? Probably cuts herself for attention." Sarah's grip on her sign tightened. Her vision blurred. The warehouse walls seemed to close in. She had come here to feel less alone. Instead, she had never felt more exposed. The opening chords of "Serve the Servant" exploded through the PA system. Kurt Cobain stood center stage in an oversized cardigan, blonde hair hanging in his face, eyes half closed as he leaned into the microphone. The crowd surged forward. Sarah was pushed by the wave of bodies. Her sign crumpled. Behind her, the bullies shoved harder, crushing her between the crowd. One yanked her hair. She yelped, but the sound was swallowed by the music. Kurt played through the first verse, but something was wrong. His eyes, usually closed during performance, were scanning the crowd with unusual intensity. He saw something. Midway through the second verse, Kurt stopped playing. Just stopped. His hand went up, signaling the band to cut. Dave Grohl's drums stuttered to a halt. Chris Novoselic's bass note hung in the air. 18,000 people fell into confused silence. Kurt stepped to the edge of the stage, his guitar hanging loose. He pointed directly into the crowd. "You! Yeah, you 3 dickheads in the back, with the backwards hats." The warehouse held its breath. "I see what you're doing," Kurt said, his voice low and dangerous through the microphone. "I see you pushing that girl. I see you laughing at her." Sarah's heart stopped. The entire crowd turned to look. She wanted to disappear, to evaporate, to cease existing entirely. But Kurt wasn't done. "Get the hell out of my show." The 3 guys froze. One tried to laugh it off, raising his hands. "Dude, we're just having fun." "Now," Kurt's voice cracked through the PA like a whip. "Security, get these pieces of garbage out of here." The security guards moved through the crowd. The three guys were escorted out, their protests drowned by the roar of approval from the audience. Women screamed, men pumped fists. Someone started chanting Kurt's name, but Kurt wasn't basking in applause. His eyes were still locked on Sarah. "Hey," he said, speaking directly to her now, his voice softer. "What's your name?" Sarah couldn't speak. Her throat had closed. Tears streamed down her face, hot and unstoppable. Kurt motioned to security. "Bring her up here." What happened next wasn't protocol. It wasn't part of any show plan. It was pure, unscripted humanity. Security parted the crowd and guided Sarah toward the stage. Her legs barely worked. She climbed the stairs in a daze, clutching the remnants of her sign. Under the stage lights, she felt naked, exposed, every scar on her wrists visible under the harsh white glow. Kurt unplugged his guitar and set it down. He walked over to Sarah, and in front of 18,000 people, he did something extraordinary. He hugged her. Not a quick, obligatory side hug. A real embrace. The kind you give someone when you know exactly what they're going through, because you've been there yourself. His hand rested on the back of her head. She could hear his heartbeat through his thin shirt. "Thank you for coming," Kurt whispered, quiet enough that the microphones didn't pick it up. "Thank you for being brave enough to be here." Sarah's knees buckled. Kurt held her steady. When they separated, Kurt took the microphone again. His voice was thick with emotion. "This girl right here, she's more punk rock than anyone in this building. You know why? Because she showed up. She showed up even though it scared her. That's what this music is about. Not being cool, not fitting in. It's about showing up when everything tells you to give up." He turned back to Sarah. "What's on your sign?" Sarah unfolded the crumpled poster. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you, Kurt." Kurt read the words, and something broke in his expression. His eyes reddened. He nodded slowly. "No," he said quietly. "Thank you." He picked up an acoustic guitar from the side of the stage. "This one's for you, Sarah, and for everyone else who's ever felt like they didn't belong." What followed was a stripped-down version of All Apology that would be bootlegged and traded among fans for decades. Kurt sang it directly to Sarah, who sat cross-legged at the front of the stage, tears streaming down her face, finally allowing herself to feel everything she had been holding back. 18,000 people swayed in the darkness, lighters held high, witnessing something sacred. When the song ended, Kurt helped Sarah down from the stage, but before she returned to the crowd, he pressed something into her hand, a guitar pick. On the back, scrawled in Sharpie, were 3 words: "You matter, K." Every detail you've just read is based on verified accounts from witnesses at that show. Sarah Mitchell's story was documented in a 2004 alternative press interview. The bootleg recording exists. You can hear Kurt stop the song. This isn't mythology. This happened, verified by Sarah herself, photographer Charles Peterson, and 14 other attendees. The miracle and the legacy. Sarah returned to her spot in the crowd, but she wasn't the same person who had entered that warehouse. Something fundamental had shifted. When Sarah went home that night, she didn't pull out the suicide note hidden in her desk drawer. Instead, she pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not a goodbye, a beginning. She wrote about her mother, about the pain, about Kurt's hug, about the way his heartbeat felt steady and real against her ear. She wrote until her hand cramped and the sun started rising. That notebook became a journal. The journal became a habit. The habit became a lifeline. 6 months later, Sarah started a support group at her high school for students dealing with grief and depression. She called it All Apology, named after the song that saved her life. The group started with 3 members. Within a year, it had 47 students. Sarah went to college. She majored in social. She specialized in youth suicide prevention. Today, Dr. Sarah Mitchell runs a nonprofit in Seattle called the Guitar Pick Project. The organization provides free mental health services to teenagers dealing with loss, trauma, and suicidal ideation. On her desk in a small glass frame sits a worn guitar pick with 3 barely legible words: "You matter, K." The organization has served over 12,000 young people since its founding in 2001. Based on suicide rates for at-risk youth, Sarah's work has likely saved hundreds of lives, all because Kurt Cobain stopped a song and chose empathy over entertainment. But here's the detail that will break you. Sarah was at home in Seattle on April 5, 1994, when she heard that Kurt had taken his own life. She was 20 years old. She attended the public memorial at Seattle Center, standing among thousands of crying fans, holding that guitar pick in her trembling hand. In interviews, Sarah has said, "The hardest part wasn't the loss itself. It was the knowing. Knowing that the man who saved her life couldn't save his own. Knowing that he had given her permission to survive, even as he privately struggled with the same demon. He made me feel like I mattered when I thought I didn't," Sarah said in a 2014 documentary interview. "The cruelest irony is that I don't think he ever believed the same thing about himself. I wish I could have stopped his song. I wish I could have told him what he told me. You matter, you matter, you matter." This story isn't really about Kurt Cobain. Not entirely. It's about the ripple effect of a single moment of courage. It's about choosing empathy when cruelty would be easier. It's about the lives we save without knowing it when we decide to see people's pain instead of looking away. Kurt stopped his song for one girl in 18,000. He didn't know he was saving her life. He didn't know she would go on to save hundreds more. He just saw someone hurting and decided that his concert, his set list, his image, none of it mattered more than her dignity. That's the unthinkable part. Not that he defended her, but that he valued her humanity over his performance. In an industry built on ego and spectacle, he chose the invisible girl with the homemade sign over his own mythology. You have that same power. You might not be a rock star with 18,000 people watching, but you see people every day who are drowning in crowds. The kid eating alone in the cafeteria. The coworker who stopped laughing at jokes. The family member who says they're fine, but their eyes tell a different story. You can stop your song for them. You can pull them out of the crowd and say, "I see you. You matter. Thank you for being brave enough to still be here." That decision, that single moment of intentional empathy, might be the difference between someone's survival and their surrender. You'll probably never know the full impact of your kindness. Sarah had no idea that Kurt was fighting his own battle with despair. Kurt had no idea that Sarah would build an organization that would save thousands. We rarely know the weight of our words until years later, if ever, but we have to speak them anyway. We have to stop the song. So here's my question for you. Who in your life needs you to stop the song right now? Who needs you to break the protocol and say, "I see you suffering, and I'm not going to look away"? Drop their name in the comments. You don't have to tag them. Just write it down as a commitment to yourself, and then go find them. Today, not tomorrow. Today. And if you're the one suffering right now, if you're the Sarah in the crowd holding a crumpled sign, please hear this. You matter. Your pain is real, but it's not permanent. The voice in your head that says nobody would care if you disappeared, that voice is a liar. There are people in your life who would stop everything to help you. Sometimes you just have to let them see the sign. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Not because it's a cool story about a famous musician, but because somewhere, someone is standing in a crowd feeling invisible, and your message might be the guitar pick they carry for the next 30 years. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being brave enough to still be here. You matter.